to release the weights, you can get a copy as well. Somebody told me to college, one day the definition of SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, that definitely is something that we can policy and stuff. I would suggest other people do it as well, because a lot of this is regulated in terms of what you see on the assessments organisations, and then at the same time, to bring to the room there, is basically provided a traditional very much a headline overview of so much information.
Rob, thank you very much for supporting Pathway today. Obviously, we've had a fantastic turnout for our presentation that we've done jointly. We're at the World of Learning Conference in the NEC Birmingham, which is happening over 2 days, and we're at the apprenticeship zone, talking about the changes that have happened in terms of the apprenticeship aspect of it, and also the changes that are planned to happen. Most of the audience today were SME or SMEs. Tell me your thoughts a little bit. Obviously, the changes that are happening, and obviously the response that we've had today, Rob.
Well, obviously the thing you've got to point out first is the proposals at the moment. We've been waiting now to find out exactly what is going to happen, but so lots of feedback, lots of information coming out in terms of ministers are listening. But what exactly is going to happen, we're not entirely sure. I think one of the trends will definitely be that SMEs defined as somebody who has a pay bill below 3 million.
3 million,
that they're definitely going to have to pay something into the pot. I think 10% is a fairly nominal amount. And I think they're going to get a lot more value out of it than 10% that they're going to have to pay in. So we just need to wait and see what the final changes are.
I mean, obviously a lot of people came in today looking for answers in terms of some of the issues. I mean, a lot of uncertainty. We talked about uncertainty in terms of our presentation. There wasn't much that we were able to sort of obviously give in terms of new information, but a little bit more in terms of potentially some of the things that are out there, and maybe some of the things that they should be looking at or could be preparing themselves as well. Obviously, from your perspective, if you were from an SME, if you were an SME employer, what sort of things would you sort of be looking at potentially at this moment in time? Is there a need for them to wait for any further information, or is there something that they could be looking at planning potentially?
No, I don't think there's any reason why they should be waiting. There's funding available at the moment, and I think the horizon is only good as well, and there's going to be more funding coming in, partly funded by large employers. But it's a good news story. There's going to be an awful lot of good things happening because there's money coming into the sector, and that means that SMEs should be taking advantage of what is a great deal to hire a young person to get them involved in the business.
What about from a training provider perspective? Obviously, I've got a training provider hat on. You work with a lot of training providers as well. Uncertainty is not a good thing generally, but training provider, I mean, I've seen very vulnerable, very sort of threatened in terms of where they are in the marketplace. Any sort of words of encouragement or any advice for training providers?
I think the advantage is definitely in the smaller training provider. Smaller, I would say sub 5 million, because they can change course, they can adjust to any of the changes that we're going to see in frameworks and standards, and they're just got to be nimble. But all we've seen is change in the last 5 to 10 years, so there's nothing new in that. We're just going to have to adjust to whatever the new system is. There's not a huge amount of difference in the delivery of a framework to a standard. We need to nail down exactly what's happening within these standards. But the overall delivery mechanisms are going to be similar. The one big fundamental change is obviously endpoint assessments, and there is a lot of ambiguity within that area, but again, opportunities within that area as well.
Could training providers get involved with, do you think, the EPA, the endpoint assessment, or other things? I mean, what other things could a training provider be looking at now in terms of maybe diversification, or maybe looking at other opportunities for them?
Well, I think looking at the sectors as ever and seeing where are the opportunities within the sectors. But certainly a training provider, there's no reason at all that they can't get involved in endpoint assessments. They're going to have a skilled workforce that can actually do endpoint assessments. And I think we're going to see a lot of change within the mix of awarding bodies and training providers, because it's going to be a very, very different market from what we've seen before. But there are huge opportunities purely because this is a growing sector.
I mean, from a personal perspective, I mean, obviously we've been in the training sector for a long time, and we've been focused on sort of government funding, and most training providers who I talk to have got this objective of actually moving away from government funding to commercial, but sometimes they've not been able to do it because of various pressures. In ourselves, we've had certain targets that we've not been able to meet, although we have moved towards that towards the levels. I mean, obviously, in terms of you mentioned, EPA as endpoint assessment as an opportunity. Are there any others in terms of maybe things that they could look at? Traineeships, is there funding available? Any other funding streams? Advanced learning loans, a lot of changes happening there. Anything else from a training provider? Any advice for training providers?
I certainly think advanced learning loans are a huge opportunity, and being able to attract learners that don't want to take out commercial loans, don't particularly want to take on an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
So that's one huge opportunity. But I think also within non-apprenticeship activity, there are traineeships and other areas, but as we all know, the funding is relatively limited in those areas. So apprenticeships, and I think as we move into standards, with the extra money that's coming into the sector and the extra money per standard, I think the added value that you can offer an organisation around the apprenticeship and for the organisation in general, it's going to forge a new relationship, and I think that's where the focus needs to be, of forging that relationship with employers, whether they're SMEs, whether they're large companies, understanding through a training needs analysis process what they want, and adjusting the funding system to be able to help them to do it. For Brexit, we need a lot more skills in this country to compete, and there is going to be a lot of opportunities as a result of the levy bringing the funding in to be able to help the organisations, the employers, be able to upskill.
With these employers, these businesses that are out there may regard this as an opportunity for themselves to potentially set up a training division, look at another income stream. Any thoughts in terms of advice or encouragement or discouragement, or any views in terms of potentially this?
My personal view is I think we're going to see a lot of providers becoming managing agents of an outsourced training. The problem for employers is they may see it as an easy route to get to the money, but as we all know, the administration and the complications of administration are huge within this sector. There are some large organisations that have really invested in this and do it well, but the majority of employers that have dabbled in this have really come unstuck. So I think people are going to be able to see that for employers, focus on your core business, let the experts come in and help and support. That managing agent may not be able to do all of the apprenticeships and all the training requirements, but they can act as a managing agent to find other organisations to support them to be able to fill those holes.
So potentially a lot of risks, reputation damage as well, potentially if you get it wrong.
You look at Quick Fit Next and a few others that have actually been in the headlines over the last 12 months. It's not what you want splashed all over the newspapers.
No. But if they were to do it, they need to do it obviously with the right team, do it as part of a sort of a longer term strategy and so forth, and do it the right way rather than thinking it's a quick income stream for them. So potentially there may be partnerships with other training providers, or maybe even looking at maybe opportunity of maybe purchasing or procuring, or buying a training provider. A lot of training providers in the marketplace at the moment that are sort of looking to possibly leave the marketplace, and there's obviously a lot of them that are coming in as well, so a lot of change happening generally in the sector.
We've seen change in terms of lots of buyouts, there's venture capital money, which must mean it's an attractive sector. If venture capitalists are looking at it, there must be returns, but again, my personal view would be most employers are going to want to stick to core business and have partnerships rather than taking the risk of procuring a training provider.
Talk a little bit about colleges. I mean, obviously we're in that sort of FE sector. Colleges have had their role. Their role is sort of to a certain extent diminishing. Still very big players in the whole sector. Any thoughts in terms of where are the colleges currently in your?
I think it's a really tough time for colleges. They are an institution based in a neighbourhood, based in a community, and they provide a service. I think they've slightly lost their way in terms of some of the courses they provide, which is why we've seen the 16 plus skills plan, trying to promote very much, as well as we have the traditional academic routes, a very clear vocational route. Colleges have a good opportunity to invest in that, but that's 2020 onwards. I think as we started to see with Train to Gain going back in the mid-90s, apprenticeships as we see now, it's a very difficult market for them because their business model has to change so much, and they employ thousands of people usually, small provider can actually chop and change as like a little speedboat.
Yeah, they're more lean and agile and so forth.
And a college is like a great big oil tanker that's very slow to twist and turn, and they're in a tough place. Hence, why we see lots of industrial unrest within the college sector in general.
Yeah, I mean, we're at the World of Learning conference. I mean, this is the apprenticeship zone. I mean, we've got 2 universities here that are also exhibiting. Obviously, universities are now looking at this as a marketplace for them. Higher degree apprenticeships coming in. Any thoughts in terms of maybe from your perspective, is there a room for universities to look at this as a market opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a room for providers who will need to work with universities to get the accreditation. A university is its own awarding body. Yeah. But for universities as well, they have the employer links. Yeah. They have potentially a market for learners as well. Yeah. And it's very attractive for a learner to be able to actually go through a degree process as a degree apprenticeship and not come out with a debt. Yes, they've got to work and they've got to study. That's a bit tougher than going to university for 3, 4, 5 years. Yeah. But the end result is a much stronger result because they've been employed and they're of use right the way through that process, rather than having pure academia for 3 to 5 years and then going out to the world of work. So I think we are going to see a growth of higher apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships, as has been seen from some of the larger organisations like KPMG buying into these processes. Yeah. Okay.
Rob, you touched on Brexit and you talked about some of the changes that happen as a result of that. Obviously, going to happen in the next few years. Yep. ESF funding has been a mainstay for most colleges and training providers. Yep. Where do you see that sort of fitting in terms of ESF funding? Obviously, there's a round of ESF funding that's going to be released at the moment. We've had some news in the last sort of couple of months as well. Any thoughts in terms of ESF?
Well, as we all know, we were one of the few countries that put into the EU more than we got out. Yeah. So that means there should be money available for the government to be able to invest in its own right, not having to conform to European rules of where Europe wanted us to invest in skills. Yeah. But they will still have that money. Yeah. It just won't be going to Europe and coming back to up the game in terms of skills within this country. We continue dropping down all the OECD rankings, and we need the government to actually really do some work in investing in skills, which probably, hopefully, more than replicates the money that we lose from ESF and other funds.
Okay. Where are local authorities in this? Obviously, local authorities have got a lot of agenda. They've got a big agenda in terms of obviously youth employment needs, in terms of getting people back into employment. They've had a bigger stake previously. Where do you see local authorities in terms of fitting in?
Well, I think up until the European vote, we had a fairly clear direction with LEPs and combined authorities starting to take more control, and we had a fairly clear localism plan. Yeah. Since that time, it has all become a lot more confused. We're now being told you don't have to have mayors, and there's been various different changes. So I think that is a very confused marketplace at the moment. Yeah. And to be honest, I'm not really clear which direction it's going. But again, all I would say is there is money in the pot, and it's going to have to be distributed and spent in some form. Yeah. And it's only providers that the people that can actually do that. Yeah.
Is there infrastructure within the LEPs in terms of managing this, or within the whole sort of local authority, regional basis? Is that possible? Is that is that there? Is it or is it a transition in terms of getting there?
Well, it's very fragmented across the country. Yeah. There are some LEPs which are very advanced and have infrastructure within them, and yes, they can take control. Yeah. There are equally as many LEPs that have no infrastructure at all, and it literally is, the adage is one man and a dog, and they have no infrastructure. So it is a very, very mixed picture across the country.
Yeah, I just want to touch a little bit about the agency, skills funding agency. A lot of the changes that have happened, obviously, from our, we talk about SFA on a daily basis. Obviously they've gone through a lot of change themselves. It's a completely different sort of, organisation to what it was even a year ago. What's your thoughts in terms of where the SFA is, where EFA and all these sort of funding agencies are at the moment, and where do you see them going forward?
Well, it's amazing what's happened in the last 3 to 12 months, really, in that we have Peter Launer, who was head of the EFA. He's now head of EFA and SFA. Yeah. He's recently also become head of the interim head of the Institute for Apprenticeships, which is going to oversee all of the reforms and manage the governance of apprenticeships ongoing. Yeah. We've seen BIS be disbanded, which was a rumour for quite some time that BIS was going to disappear. So now we have the SFA under DFE. Yeah. That will all settle down, and hopefully maybe that will give us some better a common approach between the SFA and the EFA, and the obvious end route would seem to be that all of that will merge together and come under one umbrella, one agency. But there's been nothing formal stated around that.
Yeah. So going back to where we started from in terms of ambiguity, uncertainty, we're in that place at the moment in terms of, you know, obviously, you know, we've had, you know, 40 plus people that came to attend our conference, our talk.
Yep.
You know, again, so there is a lot of uncertainty there. Hopefully within the next sort of 3-4 months we're going to get a little bit more information. We'll obviously update as we can. I want to talk a little bit about you, obviously, you know, your good self, your background. You know, your organisation is called RGFE. From a personal perspective, tell us a little bit about how you got into the sector, the sort of work that you do. Just share that with the audience, please.
Okay, well, I'm an ex-apprentice. I then went to university. I became one of the youngest chartered engineers. I'm now a fellow of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers.
Yeah.
Do work with EngTech level, which is mainly the apprenticeship introductory level into engineering. I was in engineering right the way up and through until 1999 when I fell into virtual college with opportunities around e-learning and computer-based learning. That led me into understanding about funding. And I can remember reading in 2002 the first FEFC guidelines. And from that point on, I've sat on SFA panels and worked for a variety of providers right the way through until 5 years ago. So 2011, and that's when I decided, well, actually, I think I've got a skill set here. I'm very mathematical, so I can help people manage funding contracts, the maths behind it. I have a knowledge of the sector, and I have a knowledge of a lot of people that can help to connect organisations. So strategically, I help businesses, providers, essentially manage their funding contracts, work in the right ways to get more funding. And I'm different to an auditor who sees the funding rules as an audit document, as a compliance document. I see it as an opportunity document. How can we work within these rules to gain advantage for both the provider, yes, but for the learner and the employer as well, to be able to get the most out of the government funding, and that's where my skill set really comes in.
So, like a strategic advisor, a little bit of a problem solver, you're able to guide businesses and so forth. And
it sets strategy, but it has detailed action plans as well, and at times it gets very much involved in the detail where there may be some controversy over a particular funding rule and what's intended by it. And my contacts, it comes in very, very helpful as I'm labelled as this funding guru, but essentially, yes, I do know quite a lot about the rules and guidance, but I also know a lot of people that can help me to answer questions.
The contact base and so forth. I mean, you produce a fantastic bulletin that you share with all the sort of training providers. Just tell us a little bit about how that came about and what does that entail?
Well, the funding summary was something which, as I started up, I thought I always found it when I had an operational role very difficult to keep up to date with all of the information that was being thrown at us, the links in documents and links and links and links, and it's very, very difficult. So I just thought, if I produce a funding summary, which initially was for my clients, that helps them to keep up to date with all of the main key activities, and if there's been any major documents produced, give them a little bit of a summary of that document, so you're only getting a 2 or 3 page summary of maybe a 100-page document. It helps them to keep much more abreast of everything that's changing. The great thing about it has been also a great marketing tool, because my clients were happy for me to share that with other organisations, mainly senior people within colleges and private providers, but also a number of stakeholders and awarding bodies in other areas, and that increases my contact list and allows me to be able to pick up the phone and ask questions of individuals. But the other great thing is it forces me to read all this stuff on a day-to-day basis as well. So I have to, on an ongoing basis, read it in order that I can publish that document on the first of the month, which I have done in January. It'll be exactly 5 years that I've been producing that document.
Wow, 5 years. It's one that I regularly read, so I'm a subscriber to it. I mean, obviously I get most of my information from that. So as you said, it is one place that is a bit of an executive summary. Most of it's there, and again, if you need a little bit more, then we can always come to yourself, or there's going to be a link there too for further information. So,
and even I sometimes have to refer back to old copies to remind myself what was it, and it's often easier to go there
than
it
anyone
is,
else.
it's the government documents.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So if somebody wanted to contact you, Rob, what's the best way? You're on LinkedIn, I believe. How?
Yeah, usual
Rob,
methods. LinkedIn.
Rob George, yeah.
Rob at rgfe.co.uk or through the mobile number, which again is on my LinkedIn profile.
Okay, Rob, thank you for your support. We've been working for the last sort of maybe 4 or 5 years now in terms of working together. So thank you for your support. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Rob. Really appreciate it.